Who fights for America? Americans in 2022 were surprised to learn that there is no difference between the Democratic National Committee, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the Internal Revenue Service. All of these agencies work for the Democratic Party. What happened to America where federal agencies of the executive branch decided that it was their job to serve one political party and one party alone? As we look into the deeper news beyond what the shallow news media reports to us, I wanted you to think along the lines of how radio commentator Rush Limbaugh used to look at topics. He would say, why isn't the Republican leadership in the Senate pushing back against any of this? Why isn't Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney, Lindsey Graham, why aren't any of them fighting back against the overt politicization of federal agencies to serve the Democratic Party? You'd almost think the Republicans in Congress are going along with this because they want this to happen. This is what the late Rush Limbaugh would do when looking at stories that would come in on the weekend. He'd think about it over the weekend, and he would ask himself, what are the other hosts talking about? And Rush would look for the deep analysis that he could give Monday morning on his take. And more often than not, Rush Limbaugh would have a take that nobody else did because he thought about the underlying issues behind the stories. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook relates how the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, came to Facebook in the middle of a presidential election in 2020 and asked them to censor any news that would harm presidential candidate Joe Biden. Listen in.
The Hunter Biden laptop story, the New York Post.
Yeah, we have that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Then we have this news story. Nikki Haley fires back after tax forms leaked to media. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley fired back with a scathing statement after Internal Revenue Service filings of her nonprofit were leaked and reported on by the media. Now, the news story here focuses on whether Politico should have published this data. But what's really important is that the Biden White House called up the IRS and said, get on this. We want to expose anyone donating to a conservative political action committee. And the IRS complied with the Biden White House. Someone was ordered to go work on this to release the confidential information on the Stand for America PAC. This group describes itself as a laser focused on the 2022 midterms and electing a conservative force to the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate to counter the liberal agendas of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi. Disclosure of Stand for America's confidential tax return isn't just a violation of state and federal law. It is meant to intimidate conservative donors, Nikki Haley said. Look to the deeper issue. The deeper issue is that someone at the Internal Revenue Service decided they did not want PACs to elect conservative candidates. The Internal Revenue Service decided they will interfere in a U.S. presidential election because they serve the Democratic Party. The IRS does not work for Donald Trump. The IRS does not work for Joe Biden. Therefore, they should not be working for the Democratic National Committee. Yet, there they are. Why is it that Mitch McConnell and the other Republican leadership are not fighting any of this in any serious manner? And it's tied into the FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago. Seems to indicate that the FBI simply waited for an order from Joe Biden's Justice Department and does the bidding of their political masters. What's wrong about the FBI raiding the former president's home? I would be just as offended if the FBI decided they personally worked for President Donald Trump. It's just as wrong for the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the DOJ to work personally for Donald Trump as it does for Joe Biden. In either case, that's not their job. Bear in mind how crazy this all is. It's 2022, and the 45th President of the United States has not been charged with any crime, and yet he still cannot do any interview or make any statement on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or any of the other major social media platforms. Why are these social media companies, network newscasts, cable newscasts, still censoring and blacklisting and blackballing Donald Trump from saying anything in his own defense? Is the new premise that Donald Trump is guilty until proven guilty or guilty until proven innocent? That's not any system of government that I've ever heard of based in the United States of America. To understand how we reached this point in 2022, let's go back and look at previous presidential elections. In the 2008 presidential election, talking heads determined who the candidates would be for president. They decided that the Republican Party would nominate the safe candidate, John McCain, who's a maverick because he would always work with Democrats. And the news media knew that in the 2008 presidential election, that John McCain would never offer a serious threat to the Democratic Party. Then in 2012, these same talking heads on television selected Mitt Romney as the Republican nominee, the safe, moderate choice who would never ever oppose the Democratic Party on anything like Obamacare. President Obama was safely reelected with a wide margin, all the while lecturing Mitt Romney about how Russia was no longer a geopolitical threat. Then we moved to 2016. Something remarkable happened. The voters overrode the talking heads on cable news and network news. The American people selected their president, not the news media. This was deemed as a threat to democracy, and so the news media all rallied around the Clinton campaign notion that Russia had elected Donald Trump, not we, the American people. Fast forward to 2020, and the executive branch actively worked to override the votes of the American people, and along with the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. All of this says that the executive branch will now decide who presidential candidates shall be. There is no equal justice under law. The deep state is tilting the scales of justice to the Democratic Party. Which brings us back to how Rush Limbaugh, if he were alive today, would examine these set of stories. He would not be looking at the surface story. He would go deeper and say, why isn't the Republican Party in Congress fighting back against this? Is the only person who fought for America the Buffalo helmet guy who wandered around the Senate building asking for directions from the state he was supposedly insurrecting? Who fights for America? It does not appear to be the Republican leadership in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Turtle!